Welcome to the 10,000 Questions Podcast, a podcast for students where we answer your hardest questions about God, faith, and life. Hosted by Val O'Brien, the director of the 10,000 Questions Project and personal friend and general fan of young people, listen to hear conversations that are full of genuine curiosity, intellectual honesty, and a sincere desire to know what is true and make sense of the world. Everyone has questions. What are yours?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the 10,000 Questions Podcast. We have a full Q&A episode for you today, and we are going to be jumping way into the deep end. So, you cannot even know, you can no longer see the shallow end from where we're even just going to start today. So, I hope you are excited about it. I hope you're ready for it. We're going to be talking about grief. We're going to be talking about broken relationships. We're going to be talking about addiction. We're going to be talking about parents. So, wherever you are, I just encourage you, take a deep breath, get ready to listen. Wherever you are in your journey of faith and spirituality, I invite you to ask God to be present with you as you listen and that He will help you understand what is true. So take a second, calm yourself, get ready for the deep end with us, and welcome to the podcast, my friend, Jonathan Holmes.
Hello. Thanks so much. It's so great to be here with you.
Thank you so much for joining us in the deep end today to answer these questions.
Happy to. We can swim together.
Yes, exactly. Jonathan Holmes is a friend of mine. He's a new friend of mine, but I think Jonathan, our mutual friends, I think could fill a stadium.
We could do a lot of connect the dots and do so and so for a while.
We do. So I'm so delighted that our paths finally crossed, and I'm so grateful to have you addressing some of these questions that students have sent in for today's podcast. Jonathan runs a counseling practice out of the Cleveland, Ohio area. He sits in these deep topics all the time, has thought through them, has counseled through them, all sorts of things. And so he is the perfect guy to be answering some of these questions for us today. Jonathan, can you just tell us really quickly just about Fieldstone, about the counseling practice and what you guys do?
So the counseling practice I run is called Fieldstone Counseling, and we have two main offices here in Northeast Ohio. We see couples, individuals, children, adolescents, but we also do remote counseling. So we have a team of 47 counselors here in Northeast Ohio and all across the country in every time zone nearly. And so if you have a laptop, a smartphone, a computer, and Wi-Fi, we are able to help you. And we would love to be able to help you if that would be a benefit to you.
Yeah, that's great. Fieldstone has grown so much in the last couple of years around here, around Northeast Ohio, and now expanding beyond that. But also, Jonathan is just known around this community just for the guy that he is. And so he comes with just professional experience, but also just personal experience also. And okay, this is the only shallow question we've got today.
Yes.
So you just got to enjoy it. You got to sit in it. You are the executive director of this practice, that you have 4 daughters, that you have a wife.
Yes.
You have a busy life, but if you had 2 hours at your house by yourself, free in the evening, what would you do? What would Jonathan Holmes do? How would you spend your time?
My kids and wife would probably tell you it'd be one of two things. Either I would go to bed early or I would be reading a book. So even last night, it was 8:30 and I started to go towards the bedroom and all my kids were like, "Dad, it's too early. Why are you going to bed?" But I'm an old man. I feel like I'm an old man in a younger body. Yeah, if I had 2 hours to myself on one night, I would probably go to sleep or I'd read a book. Or I would read a book and then fall asleep.
So then fall asleep while you're reading the book. I love it. I think probably a lot of teenagers could relate to I'm just going to bed. I'm going to bed. I love it. All right. Are we ready for the first question?
I think so.
The first place where we're starting today, I chose this question because we actually just received this question. It's a brand new one. And we received it probably in the last month, maybe even 3 weeks. And it has really sat with me and burdened my heart. But the question is this, and we actually received this from a middle school student. And he or she asked, how do I give advice to a friend who gets abused? How do I give advice to a friend who gets abused?
Yeah. Well, in counseling, there are a few things that make you cry and just break your heart more so than stories of abuse. And I'd say even worse when it's about a child or a teen getting abused. So whoever asked this question, I'm so sorry that your friend is going through this. That is horrible. Abuse is never God's design for human beings to flourish. That's not what God wants for you, and that's not what God wants for your friend. The second thing that comes to my mind for the person who asked this is just how humbling that your friend trusts and believes in you enough to disclose and to confide in you. And I know that that probably can feel like a big burden. That feels like a big burden when an adult discloses that to me. So I can't imagine as a middle schooler what it feels like for you to have your friend disclose this. But one of the takeaways in the midst of a lot of bad and hard is that your friend clearly trusts you and sees you as somebody that they can talk to and share heavy things. One of the bridges or connection points I would want to make would be this to your friend. I wouldn't want to be the end destination for your friend with this information. There's two places I would want to go. The first place would be ultimately pointing them to the Lord. So encourage them that the Lord knows what they are going through. He sees what they are going through, that this burdens his heart, and that when God sees his people suffering, he wants to move and act for them. Now, the second person that I think you would want to build a bridge to would be to a trusted adult. Is there a trusted adult in your life, maybe a parent, a school teacher, a trusted youth worker, where you could encourage your friend to say, hey, friend, I think that we should go and talk about what's happening to this individual, and to maybe give you some choices. As a friend, I'll normally encourage friends, give 3 options. One option could be, would you like me to tell a trusted adult? Do you want to talk to a trusted adult? Or would you like together to go and talk to a trusted adult? So what that does is it gives your friend a little bit of personal choice and agency. So it's not like, well, hey, I'm going to go make this decision for you. But hey, do you want me to help bear this burden for you? Do you want to go bear this burden, or do you want to bear this burden together? And I think each of those choices then can help empower your friend. So build that bridge and that connecting point ultimately to the Lord. And then secondly, build that bridge or connecting point to a trusted adult who can do something with it. So just want you to know that you are really functioning as the Lord's hands and ears and eyes of compassion to this friend who has disclosed this to you.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's such a great answer. I love the giving 3 options to them, and not because sometimes it can be like, okay, now this is what I need to
What do I
do.
do? Right.
Yeah. What do I do? But I think even saying, hey, this is kind of what I'm thinking. I could go, you could go, we could go. What sounds best to you? What is that going to look like? I think is such a beautiful way to care for a friend. I think that's great.
Right. Yeah, we don't want to keep the information to ourselves, especially as it relates to abuse. So talking to the Lord about it, and then definitely talking to a trusted adult, are 2 really important things that we want to empower this friend who asked this question. We really want to empower you to be able to take those steps.
Yeah, I think those are great first steps. We talk so much about pain and about just the different ways that we experience just brokenness and pain and suffering. And then how God meets us in those places. But sometimes it can be really, really hard. And the next question that I wanted to talk about again is a question about pain. And the personal nature of this one also hits my heart, because I think a lot of people could relate to this in some sort of way. But the question is this: why can't my mom choose me over addiction?
Yeah. Why can't my mom choose me over addiction? When I hear that question, I hear and feel and sense a lot of this person's pain and heartache, and even maybe hopelessness. There's something hopeless oftentimes with addiction. And again, I'm sorry that you're going through this. When you're asking this question, I can't imagine some of the disappointments, maybe some of the heartbreaks, the times when your mom's not been able to show up because of her addiction. And that really stinks. There's just no way to sugarcoat that. When you have a parent who struggles and battles addiction, there's going to be a lot of disappointment and heartache. And so one of the things I'd love to give you just a picture to help understand addiction is this picture of voluntary slavery. So when we think about addiction, sometimes professionals will say, well, addiction is just a disease. They can't help it. But a lot of times that might leave you feeling kind of hopeless, because you're like, well, if it's a disease, why can't they just take a medication or get help and just be fixed? And on the other side of addiction is also this dynamic of just being enslaved to one's choices over time, where they almost kind of become automatic. Not that it excuses what your mom is doing, but those 2 combinations of it being something physical that's happening to her, as well as something that enslaves her over time maybe gives you a little bit of an idea of the lived experience of what your mom's going through. Meaning, let's say, for instance, that your mom's addiction is alcohol, right? There's probably a part of your mom's addiction that feels very much like she has to do it. She feels compulsory, impulsive dynamics to drink, to kind of self-medicate. But there's also probably a part of the cycle where she feels like she's trapped and she can't get out of it. So what both of those two dynamics of addiction help us with is it gives us a lot of compassion, but it also gives us a lot of hope, meaning that this doesn't have to be the end destination for her. There are choices that she could make and that she could take to help her get the help that she needs. And I would say ultimately, the ultimate place for any addict who is looking for help and hope is ultimately found in Jesus Christ. So in Galatians 5:1, Paul tells the Galatians, he says, "It is for freedom that Christ has set you free." And one of the great lies of addiction is that it promises freedom, but it actually enslaves, right? So when your mom's taking that drink, or when somebody's taking that drug or that hit of whatever substance it might be, on the other side of that addiction normally is a lie promising freedom, but in the end, it actually enslaves and gives death. And what scripture says is, listen, on the other side of all of this is actually the true promise of freedom, which is ultimately found in Jesus Christ. So we can always look forward to that help and to that hope. But then also underneath that is just helping your mom get the help that she needs. And sometimes what that can be is just encouraging your mom, appealing to your mom to get help, to pursue counseling. There's a lot of different services, both social services in your community, as well as services like Fieldstone or other Christian counseling centers that can come alongside your mom and really help walk this path of recovery from addiction. And it's definitely not something that your mom can do alone. So one of the things that she will probably need from you is support and encouragement to pursue that kind of help.
Yeah, that's great. It can feel very trapping, like it's permanent, like there is no hope.
Yes.
So I think even knowing that there is hope, can be change from this is really, really encouraging. What do you do just even mentally as a young person, or even then growing into adulthood, that is watching an addict or someone close to them and they're just not changing and they keep feeling rejected and abandoned by that person?
Yeah.
Because the addiction keeps going on. How would you, even if someone was sitting in your office, help counsel that person just in how they're thinking and processing that rejection because of the addiction?
The one thing I would tell an individual whose parent or a loved one is struggling with addiction is you're not ultimately responsible for their addiction. So if you're a middle schooler who later on becomes an adult and you're really struggling with the burden of your mom or your dad's addiction, know that compassion doesn't mean you have to take responsibility for their addiction. And so I like to think of it as two circles, one circle inside of a circle. You can imagine that middle circle is your personal responsibility, and the outer circle are things that must be entrusted to the Lord. And your mom, in her addiction, that belongs in the outside circle. That's something that you can't control. Now, what is within your control is you can love her, you can pray for her, you can point her to good resources, you can be an encouragement, you can really be the light that Christ has called you to be. But you don't have to be responsible for her choices or for her addiction. And I know that's probably easier said than done. A lot of times addiction can feel very much like your responsibility. And that's where, if you are struggling with some of that over responsibility, talk to a trusted friend. Talk to a trusted adult in your life. Pour out your heart to them and let them know some of the struggles that you might be facing as it relates to that sense of being responsible for your parents' addiction.
Yeah. Yeah. This is another question involving parents, and I think it's a really good one. I think it's a really, really good one. But it is, how do I deal with self-harm thoughts when my parents don't believe in mental health?
Yeah.
And this is a great one that I love the way that the student articulated this question. And I've heard it. We've received kind of different versions of this question too. But how do I deal with self-harm thoughts when my parents don't believe in mental health?
Yeah. So Val, what I'm hearing here is almost like a two-parter in this question about self-harm and your parents not believing in mental health. So I'll try to deal with both of those together. But the first of which, with self-harm, is my encouragement to the person who asked this is, don't be embarrassed or ashamed for even having these thoughts. We need to bring thoughts of self-harm out into the open. When they stay bottled up, they actually oftentimes get worse. So we can feel like, this is so embarrassing. Nobody else feels like this. I must be so weird, or there's something wrong with me. And what I would tell you is shame multiplies in the dark. So if you are struggling with thoughts of self-harm, again, find that trusted adult to be able to share and disclose some of these things to. Now, the obvious trusted adult here in the picture would be a parent in an ideal world. But if your parents don't believe in mental health, I guess I would have some more questions. What do you mean by that when you say they don't believe in mental health? Sometimes I think for parents and people from an older generation, a lot of it can feel like a terminology issue. Like when you talk about mental health, maybe what your mom and dad are thinking about is, well, that's like psychiatrist or psychologist sitting people down on couches and they're in white lab coats. Like the thought of what mental health can feel like is very different than what mental health is today. So if mental health is just the struggles that we all go through here on earth, emotional, physical, spiritual, social issues, and being able to talk about those with a trusted friend or adult, well, then I would hope that maybe your parents would understand, listen, we're all broken, sinful people, and we all need spaces to talk about those things. So a lot of times clarifying terminology, asking your parents, oh, what do you mean when you talk about mental health? Here's what I mean when I talk about mental health. Now, for the question related to self-harm, additionally, what I would say is that ultimately that desire to self-harm, I would try with a trusted friend or adult to try to trace it back to why is that impulse there. A lot of times for self-harm, people are trying to escape something, maybe escape something that feels hard or bad. Maybe it's a way to face disappointment or discouragement or even rejection. Maybe you got rejected by a boy or by a girl or by a group of friends. Oftentimes self-harm can be a way to actually feel something. So self-harm is different than suicide. Suicide moves more in the direction of I want to end my life. Self-harm typically is more in the world of I want to feel something. There's a rush that oftentimes comes with self-harm. So one of the questions with a trusted adult or a counselor is beginning to ask yourself some questions as to why are these thoughts happening? And the big picture that I would want the student to come away from understanding is this, is that ultimately what you do to your body, it matters to the Lord. The Lord cares about your body. The Lord created you as an embodied being. In 1 Corinthians 6:19, Paul says, glorify God with your body. And self-harm is one of the ways, actually, I think that the enemy says, listen, your body, it's really not that great. You can do whatever you want to with it. And God actually says, no, I actually have a design for your body. It's so important to me that there's actually a way that you can live life in your body as I've created you for my glory. So for the kid out there, the teen who is struggling with thoughts of self-harm, I get it. But don't let those thoughts overwhelm you and paralyze you and keep you in the dark. Seek help. Don't keep them bottled up, and find that trusted friend or adult to talk to.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for breaking it down. There's a lot of different elements in that question. There's a lot there. And so here in our deep end conversation today, we've covered abuse, we've covered addiction, we've talked about mental health, self-harm, stuff like that. And people might be in various places of experiencing that, either for themselves or with somebody else in their life that they're close to, or a friend or something like that. But this next question is one that every single one of us deals with all the time. There's something going on in our relationships at all times that all of us can relate to. And so I really like this question too. It's how do you fix a broken relationship after you've hurt them?
Yes.
How do you fix a broken relationship when you know, like, oh, that was me. That
Yes.
was me. That was my fault. How do you go back and fix a broken relationship after you've hurt them?
Fixing relationships after you've done something to hurt another individual, that is the bread and butter of counseling. So much of what happens in counseling is about broken relationships. So for the person who sent this question in, I'd love to give you a big hug and a pat on the back, because it takes a lot of honesty and humility to say, hey, I might be the problem in the relationship. So, in Taylor Swift's big song, the problem is probably me right here. And a lot of times in relationships, we like to point the finger at other people, but a lot of times we do need to point the finger back at us because it is something we've done. Maybe we've not kept somebody's confidence and we've gossiped about somebody behind their back. Maybe we've left somebody out or made fun of them or done something to harm or hurt the relationship. That's what happens to broken and sinful people. We don't always make the right choices. So the encouragement I would tell you is this, is you're not alone, in relationships for the vast majority of the time are almost always repairable. Meaning when a relationship experiences a rupture, there's always a repair. So when relationships rupture, look for the repair. How can you repair the relationship? And I can just say in this case, one of the ways that you can repair the relationship is by owning that you did hurt them. So in Matthew 7:1, Jesus says, hey, before you go confront somebody else, get the log out of your own eye. And maybe this is one of the ways you get the log out of your own eye is you go to that friend and say, hey, I really messed up. And I know you might not want to be my friend. I know it might take some time for us to rebuild trust, but I really screwed up. I think I messed up and I need to ask your forgiveness. So seek out repair. And then ultimately what I would tell you is that our hope to repair a relationship is grounded in Jesus Christ, in what he does for us. When you think about relationships and hurt and relationships breaking apart, our relationship with God was severely broken and harmed by our sin. But it was in the midst of our sinfulness that God still pursued us. And in Romans 5:8, Paul tells us, he says, showed us his love in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So God pursues us even in the midst of all of our sin, our weakness, our mess ups. And that gives us an encouragement that we can then go and repair other relationships and really embody that type of movement that the Lord shows us in Christ.
Yeah. I found just in my own life that saying you're sorry
Yeah.
is like a muscle.
Yes, it is a
That
must.
like it gets easier the more you do it. Like the first time you have to do that in a relationship, you're like, oh, this is awful. This
Yeah.
is awful. This is the worst. But the more you can learn, even in small things,
Yeah.
to say you're sorry,
Yeah.
there's still going to be those times that like you really love that person and you really hurt them. And it is so hard
Yeah.
to go to them
It is.
and admit what you did wrong. And it will always be hard. You know, running a marathon will always be hard, no matter how many times you've trained, how many times you've run. But I have found that in like the normal course of relationships, if we can learn to say that we're sorry in small instances, it like grows that culture in your friendship and or it grows that culture with your parents or something like that. And it gets a little bit easier and a little bit easier. And then the rebuilding goes a little bit faster too.
Yes, absolutely. Exercise that muscle. Practice, practice, practice.
When you let so many things build up, then it definitely gets hard at the end.
And it can feel really overwhelming.
Yeah.
It's a good starting point.
Yeah. So we gotta work on those I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm sorry muscles because they don't come naturally to us.
They don't.
The last question for today is one really about grief and walking through death and through loss. And this student asked, what would I do if I lost a close family member or my parents? Yeah. What would I do if I lost them?
Well, to the person who's asking this, I'm so sorry if you have recently lost someone, or, maybe the way the question is worded, maybe your parent or a close loved one is facing a terminal illness and you're expecting or even anticipating their death. And what I would tell you is, I'm heartbroken for you. Again, death is not a part of God's original design for us. It's an intruder. It's not a part of our life as God intended it, but because of sin and brokenness, it's one of the saddest and hardest realities we have to face. In loss of a family member, it can feel catastrophic. It can feel like your world as you know it is ending. And so if that's happening or you're anticipating happening it now, one of the things that I would say you could begin doing is just, can you begin to name some of the feelings that you're experiencing? Can you begin to name some of the emotions? What are you feeling? Maybe you're feeling actually kind of angry because your parent means a lot to you and you are young and you don't want to lose a parent. And yet they're faced with this terminal illness and you are facing the prospect of losing them early. Maybe you feel just overwhelmed because you don't even know what you're going to do. What happens next? People are already asking you questions. Maybe you just want to cry all the time. And what I would say is there is no emotion that you're feeling right now that you can't bring to the Lord, that you can't name and bring to the Lord. Sometimes I think as kids and teens, we feel like, man, God's too busy with all the big stuff in the world. He doesn't really care about me and what I'm going through. And friend, nothing could be further from the truth. In Psalm 116, the psalmist says that the Lord inclines his ears to those who call on him. And the language there is of like a person kind of getting down on his knees and kind of like putting his ear down to another person so that he can hear him. And friend, our God that we serve, he wants to hear about what you're going through. So all of those feelings, all of that mix of emotions that you're anticipating as it relates to grief, bring them to the Lord. Because it's when we confess and open up about some of those feelings that we can receive the comfort of the Lord. Later on in the big Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says in Matthew 5:4, he says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." And so the connection is, in order to receive comfort, you need to mourn. You have to be honest. So don't feel like you have to stuff these feelings. Don't feel like you have to shy away from these feelings. The Lord cares. He wants to comfort you. But in order to receive that comfort, you got to be honest. You have to talk about those things with the Lord. And he's never going to turn you away. And he's never going to get too tired of listening to you.
Yeah. That's great. I hear a lot, both in some questions that I've received, but also just in some of my friendships with young people. A lot of times when a grief happens, maybe a parent passes away or there's a divorce or something like that, the student feeling like I have to be strong for blah, blah, blah. I've got to be strong for my siblings. I have to be strong for my mom. What would you say to that person who's like, Jonathan, I would love to just feel my emotions and bring them to God, but I have to shut those off in some way because I have to be strong for blank.
Yes.
What would you say to that young person?
To that young person, I'd want to give you a pat on the back and give you a big hug because that's really noble to want to be there for other people. But one of the things we say a lot in counseling is God designed us to be needy and needed. So there will be some times where you're needed, and make space for those. Rely on the Lord, but also don't be ashamed to say there might be a time for you to be needy and to ask for help. So just make sure that the balance between both of those things over time is as balanced as possible, meaning you don't want to be 100% needed in the sense of you're constantly pouring out because pretty soon you'll be on empty. But at the same time, part of that feeling of being needy over time doesn't feel good either. Part of being needy can lead to actually not having space and agency to say, you know what? I can actually move towards others and offer comfort that I've received during this time. So I think it's a both and, not an either or.
That's great. That's helpful for me, even thinking about being needed and needy at the same time and balancing those. I really like that a lot. That brings us to the end of our deep podcast. I think we went there. I think we handled a lot of hard topics today. And I'm so grateful for just your wisdom and your insight and your counseling experience to kind of guide us through those and little things. I know none of them can be answered in 4 minutes, but I hope for those of you listening, I hope it gets your head thinking about what your next step could be if you're in one of those situations, and just like where you need to go from here to not feel stuck in these really hard situations, but know like, hey, there are steps that I can take out of there. And this doesn't have to be like the cage that holds me, these hard things. So Jonathan, thank you for taking us there today.
Great to be.
I appreciate it so much. If something that we talked about today brought up in you, if you're like, man, I do need somebody to help walk me through this, I think maybe a counselor or going to therapy or something like that could be something that would really benefit me. Talk to your parents, talk to a trusted adult, talk to somebody about like what you experienced listening to this podcast and what kind of alerted you to that, and then pursue it together. Pursue it, talk about it. Like Jonathan said so many times, these things, if they stay bottled inside of us, they grow. So don't, even if it's something little, don't let it grow inside of you. Let it out. And there's lots of places you could go, Fieldstone. And, if you have a computer, which you do, which is why you're listening to this on the internet, they could serve you. So there's going to be a link to Fieldstone in our show notes. You can check that out. Also, if you want to stay in touch with Jonathan, you can find him on Instagram, right? On social media. Jonathan, what's your handle?
At AK Jonathan Holmes, my name.
I love it. Love it. So you can find him on Instagram. And we can't wait for you to join us for another Q&A episode on the 10,000 Questions podcast. Thanks for being with us today.